we are. It is May, hold on, 25th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our second candidate forum in the 2022 election cycle. We decided to focus on school board races in Arizona. For those of you who might be new to Secular AZ, we are a 501c3 organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade in Arizona. I'm excited to be hosting our second in a series of candidate forums for school board candidates in Arizona. And again, we decided to begin hosting this type of event because our members care about the growing threat of white Christian nationalism in our state and country. And we're seeing how this political ideology is threatening our local school boards. And our local school boards truly are the heart of our democracy. I know that we probably have some newcomers here, and if our mission is something that you care deeply about, we ask you to consider becoming a member of our organization, perhaps even becoming a monthly donor, or volunteering for our various events throughout the state, which we will tell you about later. Or better yet, you could do all three. We would love to have you in all three capacities. So tonight, we will be speaking with candidates for the Peoria Unified School Board School District race. According to public records, there are 5 candidates running for 2 seats in Peoria. And I want to acknowledge that the other 4 candidates, there are 4 other candidates running in Peoria Unified School District. Carrie Starkman, Heather Brooks, and Amy Sexton did not respond to our email invitations. And Devin, oh boy, I didn't write down her last name, but it's Upgraph Day, I think, or Up to Graph Day. She responded to say, and I quote, "I appreciate the invite to your organization's upcoming PUSD candidate forum, but I am not sure how your organization fits in with the PUSD school board election. It states that Secular AZ is considered to be a nonpartisan organization. However, after visiting the organization's website, I believe it to be extremely partisan. I want to thank you again for the invite, but I will be declining the offer." And I bring this up because I found this statement to be alarming myself. A school board member can oath office that states that they solemnly swear to affirm that they will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona and defend the U.S. and Arizona against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and states they will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of their office. One of the guarantees in the Constitution is the Establishment Clause, the freedom of and from religion. And all of our elected officials should be expected to uphold their oath to the Constitution. So I'm just going to throw that out there for the good people of Peoria, because I'm concerned if part of being elected is upholding the Constitution, that there might be somebody who is not willing to do that. So tonight, that means that we will be speaking exclusively to school board candidate Melissa Ewing. She is a parent, she's a counselor, and she knows a lot more about herself. So I am going to let her go ahead and introduce herself. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, thank you, Jeannie. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. Well, first off, I am a parent of 2 kids that have been attending PUSD. My daughter actually just graduated from high school, so she's a senior. She just graduated. She went to Liberty High School. And my son is, he's going to be a junior in Liberty High School, and they both went to Vistancia Elementary, and they've had a wonderful experience there. And I got involved with the schools as they started school, and I was volunteering in the classroom, and then working my way into volunteering in the school, and also being on PTO board. I was a vice president on there. We were advocating for funding for the whatever the teachers and school needed that they didn't have from the district or from the state. And so we did a lot towards that. And then that led me to working as a substitute teacher, since I was already spending so much time in the classrooms, working as a substitute teacher. And I've done that over 6 years, been in the classroom, even when throughout COVID and so forth. So that's given me a unique perspective on what's happening within the classroom, and also the the issues and concerns of parents as well. And then on top of that, I do have a master's of education in both guidance counseling and also a master's of counseling in marriage and family and child therapy. So that gives me that perspective as well. My leadership style is collaboration. And so I believe that we need to be bringing all the stakeholders together, working for the best needs of the student in solving any sort of issues that should come up, and making sure that the focus is on academic success for the student and emotional well-being. And my logo is the red heart, and that stands for my love of learning, love of teachers, love of schools, and love of community. So that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Sounds like you're really invested in your community. So thanks again for your engagement. A few things that I want to say that the format that we're going to have here tonight, we're going to give you, because you're the only one here, we're going to go ahead and give you 3 minutes for every question. And we'll see, I'll kind of play through the questions to see if there have been things that have been answered. But I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then hopefully around maybe 6:45 or 7 o'clock, we will get to the questions from the audience. So if there are any questions coming from the audience, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A or throw them in the chat, and we will get to them. So first off the bat, the first question that I have for you is, at what point did you decide to run for a spot on the Peoria Unified School District Governing Board, and what do you hope to accomplish during your tenure?
Okay, great, thank you. So I was recognized at, it started off with, I was recognized by my peers, friends, and family for my skills of being able to offer hope and inspiration, and then guidance from my unique perspective of being a parent and educator, counselor, and my natural leadership style of collaboration. And then I knew that it was time for me to step up and lead and make a change and offer hope, when I was inspired by all of the hard work the teachers, school administrators, board members, and support staff and community members were working so hard to have the shared goal to bring students back to the place of academic success and emotional well-being. And so as a parent, when I was working in the schools, I watched more kids face unprecedented obstacles and disruptions in learning, and teachers and schools reaching out and offering compassion, understanding, and solutions in a time of great distress. I wanted to highlight and support and encourage these efforts. As a substitute teacher, I was watching teachers and schools every day put in the hard work to foster academic success, bridge the gaps in knowledge, provide a stable learning environment. And despite their own concerns for health and safety, staffing shortages that were happening, inconsistent student attendance, need for both online and in-person learning platforms, and demands for student achievement during unstable times. And I was inspired by the teachers and school staff overcoming all of those obstacles by collaborative work, working for the best interest of the students. And I wanted to celebrate and recognize those accomplishments. And then as a counselor, I was inspired by their perseverance, by all the students, parents, teachers, and support staff, despite the stress levels, to overcome all of those obstacles to do what was right for the best interests of the students. And I wanted to become a more active part of the system. And I was really hopeful as I watched teachers and schools foster positive healing relationships with students to provide a stable, nurturing, positive, safe learning environment in an unstable world. And we all need those types of positive relationships. So I think the second part of that question is kind of like, what do you hope to accomplish by that? Is that right, what you were asking me?
Yeah.
I want to keep the focus of the board on what is in the best interest of all the students by collaborating with the parents, educators, school staff, and board members to problem solve and using best practices of the education industry and providing resources to help the students thrive and succeed academically while promoting and fostering positive relationships with all stakeholders.
Fantastic. That, because we are at 3 minutes, and I do,
Okay.
even though we don't have other people here,
Oh, that's fine.
we wanted, yeah. So thank you for that. I appreciate your thoughtful answer. So what do you think then? You spoke a little bit about, the mental and emotional
Mhm.
well-being of our kids. What do you think then is the biggest challenge facing your district, and how do you plan to address it?
Okay. Well, so something unique about Peoria is is in terms of our budget issues, is that our southern schools or our legacy schools, they're having declining enrollment. At the same time, they are having needs for the facilities to be fixed up or repaired or so forth. And then what's happening in the north is we have a lot of building and growth happening, and our schools are overcrowded. And we need more high school, we need another high school, and we need another elementary school to be able to support the growth that's going to be happening. So, and coupled against that is that we haven't passed a bond. So what's happening for Peoria right now is they are having meetings to determine whether going out for another bond to try to get more funds to help fix the schools is possible, and also whether going out for a bond to build a new high school. So that's happening, and that's kind of a unique thing that's facing Peoria. And if we don't go after a bond, then we have to, PUSD has to start making difficult decisions on whether or not they would close the school, repurpose it, or so forth. So that's going to require a board member who's willing to listen to all community members, to show compassion and be able to make difficult decisions, because there's really not a great decision if we don't get the funding. The other thing is resources. There's a shortage of staff. We saw that last year. We had problems with bus drivers getting the kids to and from schools. We don't, whether it's guidance counselors, psychologists, special education teachers, administration, office staff, classroom teachers, to aides, means that our students don't have the resources they need to be ready to learn when they are in the classroom. And we need to find ways to retain and recruit the necessary personnel to ensure student academic success and emotional wellness, and make that a priority. And some of the districts around us have a little bit better, they may have better salaries or maybe starting bonuses, that type of thing for some of those jobs. So we do tend to lose people to other districts. So that's a challenge specific to Peoria. And then misinformation. And I really think that the district and the schools have a responsibility to provide education or maybe corrections on information that's out there to the community members so that they can make the most informed decisions. And it's imperative by giving them information and making sure it's accurate, so that they can make good decisions, and that will only improve the trusting, hopefully collaborative relationship we can have with parents and community members. So.
Great. Yeah, no, I remember too, Peoria was one of the few in Maricopa County that was not able to. I think of Cave Creek Unified School District, I think of Peoria, there's a few others that really struggle. And it's unfortunate, as a former school board member myself, nobody ever wants to go out to the constituents and say, hey, we're going to need some more tax money from you. But because we're so wildly underfunded at the state level, it becomes our only option. And so it's got to be tough to be in a district. I'm grateful for the fact that in my district in Creighton, we were able to actually get most of our bonds and overrides passed. And because of that, we're able to build beautiful facilities and all kinds of stuff. So, and the teaching retention crisis right now that's going on in the entire state, and I mean, one could argue the entire country, is a very real threat to just public education in general. And I would say further, maybe even a threat to our democracy. So thank you for that answer. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and skip the next question that I had. So based on your understanding of school boards, and I'm assuming here that you've probably gone to some school board meetings. I hope
Yes.
you have. Good. Because it's funny to me always too, when people decide suddenly that they want to run for their school board, but they've never been to a meeting. And the first time you're seeing them is, after they've gotten elected, and you're like, who is this person? But so clearly you've been going to your meetings. But based on your understanding, what are the main roles and responsibilities of school board members?
So the main roles and responsibilities, well, they're a big part of putting together policies and procedures, but they are not, they don't do the implementation to that. So they have to, one of the big things that sometimes gets lost is communicating out what those policies and procedures mean and so forth to the schools, because sometimes there's just misconceptions. So and then I believe that the school board's responsibility is to make sure that whatever policies they're putting together, that it provides that it is not negatively impacting any one of any student in there. It should be representative of what all the students need. And we just have to be very careful that any policies we put together don't inadvertently negatively impact one particular group. So I think that's very important. I also think it's the responsibility of the school board to know what the views and the thoughts and the opinions are of their members, so that when they're casting votes, that they're being representative of their community, and that they've taken into account what everybody, all the folks in the district want, and not just a small group of people. Because oftentimes what happens is what you're hearing at the school board meeting, the views and just those people speaking, is not representative of the majority of families at the district. So I think it's really important that the board members reach out and they're in tune to what's actually happening at the district level, and then, or district wide. And then I think that, legally they need to understand what's allowed, and communicating that to their staff members in terms of what's allowed in the classroom, what's not allowed in the classroom, making sure that everyone understands that, because sometimes I think there's problems when people make assumptions. So that's, and I do also think that another responsibility of the board member is to support the staff in their decisions, and also supporting all of their efforts and so forth. Jeannie, since you're back, I'm assuming I'm close to that time frame.
I'm actually not even sure, but I felt like you were kind of winding down. So, and of course, school board members, they're in charge of hiring the superintendent.
Yes.
They have to monitor the budget. But you brought up actually a really interesting point, because you said that we need to make sure that all voices are listened to, and that every stakeholder has a seat at the table, but without allowing, say, fringe groups to make decisions for the entire district.
Right.
And so I think this next question is a perfect segue from your answer. So, boy, in 2020, 2021, 2022, depending on where you've been living, we've seen some of those fringe groups kind of show up at our board meetings. And a lot of the things that they're talking about is things like diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, or comprehensive sex ed, CSE. So I want to know, do you support programming that includes comprehensive sex ed and or diversity, equity, and inclusion programming in Peoria Unified School District?
Okay. So I think first, before you talk about any sort of curriculum, I think that anything that's in the classroom has to be developmentally appropriate. So You are not going to teach, if there's going to be a sex education done in the classroom in the high school level, you're not going to teach the same thing there, if there was to be any teaching at the kindergarten age. So it has to be developmentally appropriate. And I think that I think that as far as all of those different topics you were talking about, it is important to, first of all, understand if there's any legislation that's legally preventing the teachers or the board from having that in the curriculum. So I think they first need to understand that and make sure that they're following whatever is allowable by law. And second, I think they need to make sure that they look really clearly and closely at the curriculum, making sure that they're meeting the state standards, and how or if even some of those conversations are appropriate for the curriculum that's to be studied in the classroom. And I also think that you have to be, if you're approaching a topic that could be controversial in the classroom, I think it's important to talk to the families and let them know that there may be topics discussed, so they have the ability to opt out if it's something that is not in line with their beliefs or value systems, or even maybe religious affiliations. And so I think that piece is important to communicate ahead of time. I do think that teachers are equipped and trained to have difficult conversations in classrooms about topics that would come up or are part of the programming. But I also think that they need to be very clear that they're just talking about facts, general information, and keeping their own value systems out of that. And only having conversations about opinions as it relates to maybe the material, and not that they're imposing their own values upon the students. So I don't know that that answered all of it, because there was quite a lot that you had listed there. But I just think you have to take all of those things in mind when discussing any of those kind of topics. So, but we have to make sure that all of our students feel supported, that they feel included, and that we have to make sure that every student has the ability to have equal opportunities for academic success, and whatever that needs, it means that they need to be provided.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, the legislature is going to make it tricky. In fact, today I think it was SB 1412, which is essentially an anti-CRT bill, you know, kind of being put forward. And you mentioned opting out of things, and you know, that's always existed. It's always existed for parents to be able to opt their children out. So it's interesting that this legislative session we're seeing kind of mandates coming down and then punishments being handed out, even though these are things that we already have policies for at the school board level.
Right. Right.
So let me go ahead and move on to, because I feel like this actually fits in, because you also mentioned making sure that we're inclusive, and that also means honoring somebody's religious beliefs. And because we are secular AZ, you know, something that's very important for our members is the idea of the separation of church and state. So tell me, what role, if any, should religion play in our public schools?
Well, first, I think that if we have good relationships, like teachers in schools, if they have good relationships with families and understand the diverse backgrounds that they come from, the culture, and even the different religious affiliations or spiritual affiliations, there's an opportunity to celebrate those differences. And I think it's also good to understand reaching out and fostering those relationships is helpful in terms of if there's if there's any sort of beliefs or that families might not want to be discussed, or that they would want to opt out of. So I think that religion, understanding somebody's religion and cultural background helps to foster a better relationship. But in terms of should religion be a part of the curriculum, I don't believe that it should be a part of the curriculum. It's not in there for the state standards. But it is important to recognize that we all have different religious backgrounds and different spiritual backgrounds, because that makes up who we are, and we need to have acceptance. Like if somebody if there was a teacher who was of a different religious background than maybe myself, I would want to, I would want my child to know a little bit of information about them, just to be able to celebrate who they are and what great things they bring as a teacher. And so I think there's ways that we can celebrate that, the differences, but I don't believe in the actual curriculum that there should be. And the laws state that we shouldn't be forcing or coercing our religious beliefs on students, but we can certainly recognize and appreciate and have an awareness of their religious beliefs.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that it's important to understand religion and the role that it plays in our society. And so I very much appreciate that answer of allowing for diverse beliefs, but not mandating, one particular belief over another.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. And then I think in a few minutes here, we're going to be opening it up to the audience. And I see we have a couple of questions. But let's talk about, because this legislative session is really kind of next level, we've seen a number of education or school focused bills become law, or they're about to be signed into law, with many others that are waiting in the wings. So is there a particular bill this legislative session that gave you the most concern? It doesn't matter if you know the numbers of the bill, but was there something that you were aware of that really caused you concern, and how would you handle its implementation as a board member?
Yeah, and yes, there's a lot of numbers to keep track of out there. But I think that, as I've been learning more about school boards this whole year and been involved in it, certainly any bills that come up with regards to funding, I pay attention to that, because it can mean a difference in staffing, for instance, in the classrooms. So we have to pay attention to anything that has to do with funding. Are there bills that either take away, add to, or maybe define specific uses of that money, because that can help drive what the board can and can't do. So I think it's important to pay attention to that, and any bill that is out there that, what happened with Prop 208, that's very upsetting. And it's anything that takes away funding from the schools that already need it. It's very concerning, and we have to pay attention to it, because it drives what the board can and can't do. And then any bills that also take away from resources that the kids would have in the classroom, and it takes away teacher time to spending time on actually teaching to make sure they're having academic success, that they're showing growth. So any sort of bills that take away resources, I've been concerned about that as well. I'm trying to think of an example of a bill out there, and I can't think of it right away, but yeah. And then anything, with what's recently happened in the news, any bills that take away the district's ability to provide a safe, stable learning environment is also a concern for me, like the one where they're talking about possibly allowing students to bring guns on campus and have them in the car. That causes me concern, because that could create problems for the safety of the folks on the school campuses. And so any bill that takes away the district's ability to do things to provide a safe, stable learning environment are things that concern me as well. So.
Great. Yeah. And especially in these last 24 hours.
Yeah.
I thought heavily about that bill. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head because there's so many bad bills going through the legislature, but you know, that I read a little bit about this shooter in Texas and how, you know, he had been bullied because of a speech impediment or something like that. And now in Arizona, we have passed a bill that would allow for anybody over the age of 18 to bring firearms onto campus. And so it just made me think of how much worse the news of yesterday could have been because of this ideology of the Second Amendment being more important than the First Amendment. So thank you for that answer. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to kind of just go back and forth because I have a few of my favorite questions that I love to ask school board candidates, but I know that we have questions coming from our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and play favorites just a little bit because one of our advisory board members who is a student at ASU and just a wonderful example of how all people should be, Sammy Al-Asadi, he is actually a 2021 PUSD graduate.
Oh,
and
wow.
He said, yeah, and boy, is he fantastic. I'm telling you, you got to follow this kid's career, this young man's career, because he's amazing. He says, in a recent conversation, a close teacher explained that parents want to prevent certain students from getting educated. For example, a parent complained about furries at school. How do you plan to realign the values and mission of public education despite parental pushback?
Well, first off, I think that some of that parental pushback was from a very small minority of voices. And I would also offer that, you know, I've been in the classrooms as a substitute teacher for 6 years now. I've been at all different grade levels, K through 8. I haven't been in the high school, but K through 8, specials, choir band, PE, all of that. And I feel like some of what happened was very much misinformation out there, and was misinformation that was out there, and it got blown out of proportion. And most of the parents I spoke to didn't have concerns because they didn't feel like that was what had happened. So can you repeat to me the last part of that question that he asked, because I want to make sure I'm answering his specific question.
Sure, no, it was definitely a meaty question. So his question essentially is, how do you plan to realign the values and mission of public education despite parental pushback? And it has to do, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so so first off and firstmost, the mission and the values of the board should always be what is in the best interest of the student. And the board always, in my view, and the way that I would make decisions is, first off, is anything that I'm going to be making a decision on, how is it playing a role in making sure that that child is ready to learn when they step into that classroom? And focusing my decisions around that. Also, is it offering resources, or is it taking away resources from the student to be successful? Now, those resources can be teachers, those resources can be curriculum, learning modules, It can also just be transportation to school. And then how is it helping to foster and promote a positive, collaborative, learning, growth-minded environment? And so I think that if you have those three things in mind when you're thinking of the best interest of your child, then all of your decisions they become easier. They're not ever easy, but they do become easier when you have that shared value. And so when you have that value, that is the best interest, that when you have parent pushback, I think you have to start having those conversations and bringing them to the table and making them part of the conversation, but having collaborative conversations about what is in fact best interest of not just their child, but all of the kids in the district. So I hope that answers the question.
So if you've got one parent who's, I think so, I think I heard you say, like, if you've got one parent who's upset over the fact that there happens to be somebody who considers themselves, whatever, furry, or or if a child identifies as trans or gender neutral or gender fluid, we should allow for all expressions, just like you said earlier, all expressions of faith. It shouldn't get in the way of learning, but it shouldn't be blocked out of the learning. I think that's what I heard you say.
And I think that as far as the ready to learn piece, if we can offer acceptance and inclusivity to when that child walks into the classroom, then they're going to be ready to focus on the material. And if we make them feel excluded and we make them feel not accepted, they're not going to connect as easily to the classroom, and they're not going to connect to the schools, and they're not going to connect to the academics. So I think we have to, yes, we have to keep the focus on the academics, but we have to be willing to be acceptive and supportive of that child when they do walk into the classroom, so they are in a space where they're ready to learn.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, so we've got another question coming in from the audience. And by the way, if you are here, I see that we have 16 participants, so please type your answers in, throw them in the Q&A, throw them in the chat. The next question says, and I'm wondering if this is from a teacher, because it says, what are your thoughts on weekly teacher training? Do you think it is necessary and worth the cost? Boy, that is a great question.
So I would go back to having, as a substitute teacher, I've also worked as a long-term substitute teacher. So been working in the schools where I've had like a 6-week-long job. And what I can tell you is that the teacher trainings, they are important because we want to make sure that our teachers are highly skilled, that not only are they skilled at teaching their topic, but they're teaching it in lots of different ways and learning the most innovative ways to teach the students, and being able to have creativity. So there's a lot to gain in those, the teaching things. However, what I would say is that one of the viewpoints I received was that there wasn't enough time to do planning, team planning, to actually be able to take all of this knowledge and information and skills that they have and cater it to the needs of the classrooms. And with the challenges of how the kids are at all different academic, they have knowledge gaps. And so they're having to teach, be more customized in their teaching plans, that they don't have enough time to do all of that planning to make it most beneficial for the kids. So I know that I have heard that teachers would like to have more time to do that actual planning and customization of their curriculum to their specific classrooms. So so it's important, but I think they have to allow time for teachers to do their planning to be able to meet the needs of the kids, because their needs are so diverse now, I think, than before.
Yeah, and as a teacher myself, middle school and high school, I'm one of those weird people who really likes middle school and high school kids, although I think it equally strange for people to want to teach kindergarten and first grade because I can't do it. I've tried and I've failed too many times. But I just feel like there is uh it should be diverse. It should be differentiated, right? Based on your skill level, your grade level, your content area. Sometimes I've been in many a teacher training where I felt, "Ugh, why am I here right now? Why am I having to do this again for the fifth year in the row?" So I appreciate your answer because it sounds like you're looking for a more differentiated kind of teacher curriculum that you can, instead of just having to show up for something and tick off that box, you're able to actually access things that would be relevant to your content area, to your grade level, et cetera. And this next question is coming from our audience, and I'm not sure if it's rhetorical or not, because it says, why is it okay to be able to opt out of learning for your kids that might go against your religion or ideology? So that's part one. Why
Mhm.
is it okay? I mean, I feel like this is a rhetorical question because you are allowed to opt out of things and you should be allowed to. I mean, one of my board mates in the Creighton School District opted out of the comprehensive sex ed. He felt
Mhm.
very strongly that was something that he and his wife wanted to handle at home, and
Mhm.
nobody faulted him for it. The kids weren't mad about it. The teacher wasn't upset about it. But I mean, it does bring up it kind of speaks to the greater issue that we're dealing with right now in the United States, in Arizona. Why is school not a space to trust teachers to handle uncomfortable topics? And so again, I really feel like, if you want to answer this
I
question.
do have some thoughts on that. So first off, in terms of opting out of learning, so I think there's a difference between opting out of learning and opting out of assignments and getting alternate assignments. So it could be that unbeknownst to the teacher that maybe there's a reading in like an English class that they're reading about a particular author or activist, and maybe that a person doesn't want their child to read about it because they had a particular viewpoint against their religion. And so it's important that educators, maybe unbeknownst to them, they didn't know that that would cause that type of feeling. They'd be able to say, hey, okay, I got it. That's you can opt out of this assignment and I can give your kid an alternate assignment that still meets the skill that we're trying to get your child to do, like critical thinking skills, comprehension, that type of thing. So I think there's opportunity in almost all of the assignments that are given in classrooms to give an alternate assignment that is that would be better for that family and that student need, that type of thing. And I think that our teachers are skilled enough to be able to research the assignments out there to find something that would be appropriate for that student. So I think that's how I would answer that piece. And then I think that his question of why is school not a space, or I don't know if it was a he or she, but why is school not a space to trust teachers to handle uncomfortable topics? I would disagree with that. I do think, however, that anytime you have a topic being brought up to be discussed, I mean, you could take 9/11, for instance. If they know that they're going to be discussing it that week, they need to let the families know that this is going to be a topic, because we have no idea what that, unless that teacher has spoken to the families, they have no idea what that child has experienced with regards to that. And if they feel like it's not appropriate for their child to be part of that conversation, then they have the ability to opt out of that. So I think there needs to be communication ahead of time with those types of topics, but I think that the teachers are absolutely able to handle it as long as it's developmentally appropriate and they're paying attention to how it's affecting the kids emotionally, and they give them the space to be able to express things, but in a positive way, so that when everybody goes away from that information that day, that they have a positive feeling. So
yeah, no, I think, thank you for answering that. We have another question. Okay, guess we may go a little bit, tiny bit long. I'm not opposed to that because I think that our school boards really are the heart of our democracy. So I'm happy to have somebody who's stepping up and to be able to answer these questions. And these seem specific to your district. So another person has, I'm sorry, another candidate has questioned why we have duplicate, in quotations,
Yes.
assistant principals at some school. And what is your position on this? So the example that they're giving is that a school in your district, Vistancia, has 2 APs and Canyon has 1. So again, the question is, the candidate asked, why do we have duplicate assistant principals at some schools, but not all?
Right. And so great question, because Vistancia is one of the largest elementary schools out there. So just as any large business, your staffing is appropriate to the amount of staff that you have there and the amount of students, more importantly, the amount of students that you have there. Now, I can speak from personal experience at Vistancia, in that I know that I was at Vistancia when they just had 1 assistant principal. And then again, when they had, as like now, when they have 2 assistant principals. And what I can tell you is that those assistant principals typically take on different roles. You may have one who's more in charge of the behavior management, and then another person, because there's actually an increase in IEPs and 504. So sometimes you have that second one focused specifically on the IEP planning and helping doing all the meetings to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the IEPs, making sure the assessments are happening, the evaluations, talking about how kids are progressing, and then also the 504. So I think when you have that larger, and Vistancia has one of the largest populations in all of PUSD, you have to have more, because not one person can do both the behavior and then all of the additional responsibilities. I don't know exactly the population at Canyon, but I do know that, speaking from experience, I have seen parents even say that they preferred the responses that they were getting from the assistant principals with regards to those types of services was a lot better once they did have 2 additional folks to handle all of the needs of that school. So that's what I can say about that.
Great, thank you so much for that. So here we have another question. Do you feel the district has been transparent with parents? And do you feel the board has addressed important issues sufficiently and appropriately? And I'm guessing what they're asking is, do you feel that the board has addressed important issues sufficiently and appropriately based on this idea of transparency with parents?
So, well, there's 2 different things. Transparency can refer to curriculum, but I don't feel like this person is asking about transparency with regards to curriculum. It seems to me that they're talking more about transparency with regards to board actions of why or why not that they do things. And I think it's tricky, because I think that there's certain things that the district and the board members are maybe not allowed to say or do or speak publicly about, especially if there's any sort of investigation going on. And I don't think that everyone maybe understands that. I think that they could certainly do a better job at communicating maybe what they're allowed and not allowed to say when it comes to transparency. And it's unfortunate the way that board meetings are set up, because folks get up there and they raise issues, but their board members are not allowed to respond or clarify anything that's being asked of them. They're just supposed to listen, and that's their role, is to listen. So I feel like what happens is then there's no public space where things are being responded to for people to be like, huh, they raised that issue. I wonder what's happening with regards to that. And did that actually happen? And because of the way the formats of board meetings work, they're not allowed to respond in that space. And so I think that if we had more localized, like parent, maybe not forums, but town halls where we were talking about about the concerns of the parents and community members with regards to issues going on at the schools, I think people would feel like there would be more transparency. So I think if we improve those relationships, increase the communication, and have an open dialogue, I think folks would feel like there's more transparency. But I think sometimes the board members' hands are tied because they're not allowed to do things, or the way the format is set up, it doesn't give them an opportunity to really discuss in a public way what's happening.
Well, and that's really a tricky topic too, because whenever you're talking about public comments at any board meeting, whether it's an HOA, a school board, even, committee hearings. Well, I guess at committee hearings at the Capitol, they can actually ask questions during public comments if they so choose. But I've seen it play out before where threats are being made or the character of the board members is being impugned. And in those cases, I think it's really appropriate to call a point of order. But you're right. Yeah. During public comments, you're not supposed to respond. That's the general, that's what the law and the policy of school board states. So it's frustrating, but it's the way it is, because the last thing you want to do at a board meeting is to get, lost in the weeds with, conversations that you're not supposed to be having anyway, because if it's not on the agenda, you can't really address it. And I guess that's why at committee hearings at the Capitol, they are able to address some of those concerns. So I don't know if this is another rhetorical question or what, but it seems like it is, because it says, speaking of fringe groups, where are the other candidates?
So is that person asking who else is running? Because that's how I would answer the question. And I feel like you answered that at the beginning, but if you wanted to repeat who's actually running, but I don't know if they're asking like, who are they being supported by and what are their views? But if they're not here, then they don't have the opportunity to express that. And I certainly wouldn't want to speak on behalf of any other candidates.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought that question was going to go. I mean, one candidate made it very clear as to why they weren't coming today. So this same person is asking another question. So, and again, we are at 6:53. So I'm hoping that we can kind of end at 6:55 so that okay, hold on. Oh boy, there's three questions. What do I choose from? Well, we can keep going. I mean, normally these go a little bit longer, so I'm not opposed to that. So let's just go ahead and take them, because people have showed up today and I'm happy about that. We have 17 people on this call. This question says, what if a child's identity becomes a distraction to their peers? Do you prioritize a student or students? Specific to the example given earlier on furries. Boy, that is such a small population of our students, but why not answer that question? So what if a child's identity becomes a distraction to their peers? Do you prioritize a student or students?
Well, so I'm going to give you a response of, the reality of in the classroom, and especially like I know you teach in or you have taught in the middle school and high school grade levels. So what I can tell you is that almost every kid, given the stage, will find some way they'll find some way to attract attention to themselves, and maybe not every child, but I don't think it's students will because there are students who go in the classrooms who will purposely distract because they don't feel like doing the homework, or maybe aren't as engaged in the curriculum that's happening that day, if they're not really into studying math that day. So I think it's unfair. So I guess it's kind of unfair to say that only a child's appearance would distract peers in the classroom. I think that having A good classroom management plan means that we provide, it's free from distractions, and that we create a pleasant learning environment for all. So I think it's important for the teacher, and I just think that there's so many creative ways that teachers keep kids from distracting other kids within the classroom, whether it's a kid that needs to be working in silence and can't have that kid sitting next to them who is talking a lot. So certainly just rearranging seating arrangements that allows students to be more productive when they're in the class and being able to focus on the curriculum that's being taught. But I think that there's a lot of classroom distraction that happens for lots of different reasons. And I think it's, I think our teachers are skilled enough to be able to find ways to not have distractions in the classroom, but it would be unfair and to approach that child and say that because of their appearance that they need to change their appearance because it's causing too much of a distraction, when there's plenty of other kids in the classroom who create distractions in lots of different ways. And the teachers do, in general, do a great job at managing those behaviors and those things to keep the kids on track. So
I'm going to go ahead and call time on that one. Okay. But what I heard you say too was that someone's appearance or identity, sounds like, shouldn't be a reason to scrap one child over the rest. And I appreciate what you said too, because I know that behavior right now is a huge problem for a lot of teachers, because our kids have missed out on 2 years of learning because we were in a global pandemic. Yeah. That happens. And so there's a lot of catch up that we need to do. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need to take care of with regards to those kids and focusing on their needs. Holy moly. There's all these questions. This is great. I love it. The engagement is amazing. So this is a good one, because this one says, and this is from somebody who's attending, whose name is just NR. What does a teacher offer to a board position that primarily manages curriculum and funding? And isn't a board position more about business management?
Okay. I'm going to scroll up to see that question. So what does a teacher offer to a board position that primarily manages curriculum and funding? Isn't a board position more about business management? Well, I think that a board member, and that's a great question. So a board member also helps to set the tone for the district and for the teachers, and they can certainly offer support to those teachers, and they can also, as they're thinking about policies and procedures, they need to be taking into account how that might be implemented in the classroom, and is that manageable for the teacher? Does it create an undue burden on the teacher? Does it meet, the best needs of the student? Because I think the board member has more of a responsibility than just business management. They have a responsibility to creating the culture of that district as well, to be positive, accepting, supportive, because the reality is if the teachers and the schools are not successful, the district is not going to be successful, and we need good public schools because that's good for the community and the success of the community and so forth. So I think that the board member's position is very different from business management. That's how I would answer that.
Sorry, thank you so much. I feel like this is perhaps another rhetorical question. Donna asks this in the chat. How would a child's identity become a distraction? What if a student is wearing a sports jersey and another student hates that team and they can't concentrate because of it? Would you ask the student to take this off. Cultivating a respectful and accepting classroom is how to address this question. So essentially, kind of what you said. I remember dealing with what do you call it? What girls were allowed to wear, no spaghetti straps,
Dress
shorts have
code.
to be this. Yeah, dress code. Thank you. And I my own daughter, she's 5'11". And so when she wears shorts, they are not going, like, her fingertips are not, it's Arizona, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And so if she's a distraction as a straight A student and valedictorian of her senior class, well then, maybe we should be teaching kids to not ogle her or whatever. So I appreciate that question coming from Donna. I do have a couple more, but I do want to honor everybody's time. We're at 7:01. So let's just try to make the end time for this, say 7:15. If you're on board with that, Melissa, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Another question coming from the chat is, do you think board members have abused executive sessions in Peoria Unified?
Well, the executive sessions, the public isn't privy to what's happening in the executive sessions, because those, from what I'm understanding, are closed to the public. So it's really difficult to make an evaluation if they've abused it if you haven't been sitting in to make a determination if that information could have been talked about publicly. And certainly when they're in executive session and they're discussing things with the lawyers, those have to be done in more private things, in more private settings. So that's, legally that wouldn't, well, not legally, but it wouldn't be appropriate for that to be a public session. I know that I can say that there is concern sometimes that the board isn't addressing things or topics that they want addressed in a public manner, and it's instead being discussed in the executive session. But that's kind of what public comment is about. And I'm still understanding how the agenda is actually set as far as what they discuss at each public board meeting. And so I don't think I could fairly answer that. I think there's things that are appropriate to be discussed in the executive sessions and things that are not, but I don't think I could make a judgment of whether they're actually abusing it.
Right, because they're not open to the public, and it is,
Right.
Executive session means that it isn't open to the public, and there's a reason for it, because you're discussing sensitive information. It could be about a student expulsion and you don't want to reveal the identity of that student. It could be about, wages or contracts, and people don't want to have that stuff blasted out. So it's a good question, but you have really no way of knowing. And I guess the way to do that is to just, like you said, show up for public comments and ask all the questions that you need to. All right, we're at 7:03. So this one comes from, I don't know if you pronounce your name Eva or Eva, but Eva asks, what are your thoughts about having school board members participate in professional development? And she clarifies by saying education-based professional development. What are your thoughts about having school members participate in professional development, education-based?
Well, I don't see any disadvantages to a school board member gaining more knowledge of how things can be improved in the classroom. If any information that a school board member can learn that can help them to make better policies that are relatable and more effective in the classroom, I think absolutely there isn't any reason not to do that. And I come from a perspective, I went and got 2 master's degrees, and I continued learning, and I feel like it's my responsibility to continue to learn and understand lots of different things. And so I don't ever feel like any education is going to harm you and be a disadvantage for you to learn more about a topic. And especially school board members, there's so many decisions that they have to make, and having a depth of knowledge on that particular topic only makes that board member more valuable and makes their decisions be more thoughtful on and hopefully be more applicable to what's happening in the schools.
And honestly, as a board member, it was one of my favorite experiences to, we got invited to go to Phoenix Union High School District to participate in an implicit bias training. It was school board members, it was teachers, it was staff, it was administration. And we went there and we really got down and dirty with like our experience with our own implicit biases. But at the same time, we also attended trainings where we learned how the teachers were implementing, say, new math and how to go about solving complex mathematical problems, which is definitely not in my wheelhouse. So for me, it was great to see this exercise where kids were given just certain little tidbits of information and then they had to figure out a complex math problem. So thank you so much for that answer. We've only got a couple more. I want to actually, let's see. So this one says, and this is a good question because I have seen a lot of my former teacher colleagues and friends of mine who are still in the realm of education. Do you feel teachers have enough administrative support when it comes to managing student behavior, specifically student violence? Like we've seen some of these TikTok challenges, right? Where, kids are like being directed to vandalize schools and all that kind of stuff. We've seen instances of violence rising. I don't know how much of that plays into, anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and unadulterated ask you the question. So do you feel teachers have enough administrative support when it comes to managing student behavior and specifically when it comes to student violence?
I think that as far as administrative support, and that's a very general question. There's a lot of schools in the PUSD district, and there's schools that handle student behavior really, really well and have discipline plans that work really well with that specific population. And then there's schools that have a different behavior plan that maybe doesn't, or student discipline plan that maybe doesn't work as well. So I think it can be very site specific in terms of if there's enough administrative support. Myself personally, working as a substitute teacher, I feel like I have always gotten the support of administration when I felt like I've been in any sort of scenario that I couldn't handle. I was always able to call admin and ask them to come support me in the classroom. I do think one of the challenges in Arizona is that we have the K-8 schools. And so when you have a K-8 school, you have a discipline plan that you might put together for like kids in K-4, which might look very different than what you would do as far as a discipline plan for 5th through 8th. And sometimes when it's a combined school, it's really difficult to have very different behavior plans. And so because we have the K-8, I think that we have, Arizona has, or Maricopa County or PUSD has specific challenges with that, in that we don't have these separate middle school where you could have a very specific behavior plan set up just for the middle schoolers. And I've heard other districts have done that where they have like maybe a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade school, and they can talk about things that work very well there, but it's not something that would be easy to implement in our K-8 structure. So, but I would say that's site specific as far as support, and that the challenges may come more in the middle school years just because of the way that it is structured. So
yeah,
that's what I've seen.
I like that. It's a differentiated approach because that's what we need. The same solutions for behavior problems in kindergarten are not the ones that we want to see necessarily for our junior high school students. Right. So this question actually goes along. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask of school board members. And it goes along with one of the questions that's coming from the audience. So for me, my question is, what role should standardized testing play in driving school programming and policies? So I'll go ahead and copy that and put it in the chat so that you can see it. And then I'm going to go ahead and ask the other question, because I feel like the two are very connected. So what role should standardized testing play in driving school programming and policies? And then our audience member asks the question, hold on, let me go back to it. Here it is right here. At the recent study session, student academic performance was discussed and an iReady assessment example was given. So for those of you who may not know, an iReady assessment is just kind of one of those other multiple tests that our kids get, sometimes to the tune of like 90 to 100 days in a 180-day school year. So with all of the online resources that provide materials, questions, tests, do you feel that teachers are slowly becoming proctors? So let's tackle the first question first, and then we're going to wrap this up. So what role should standardized testing play in driving school programming and policies? And then the second part of that question would be, do you feel like teachers are just slowly becoming classroom proctors?
Well, so first of all, I have noted how even colleges are moving away from some of those larger standardized testings as a requirement of admission. So I think that's something pretty, that's something to take into account when you talk about standardized testing, that even if the colleges are moving away from that, there's a belief that then that doesn't necessarily indicate success that a student might have in college on how they perform on a standardized test. I think that we need to have standards for evaluation beyond testing that include measurements of academic growth and wellness. And I also think that tests don't tell the story if students are being impacted by variables that are creating obstacles to their learning. And that can be lack of resources for those students if they're not having the special education needs or resource that they need, that can negatively impact their test scores. If they're having some really challenging relationships, whether it's family, amongst their peers, that can affect their test scores as well. So I think we have to find other ways to measure growth and academic achievement. That being said, I do think it's important to be evaluating where students start and then the knowledge that they've gained to see certainly how effective those learning models are with those students. So I think evaluation is important, but I think standardized testing may also not always take into account that there can be implicit bias just in the testing itself. And I think teachers work really, really hard to try to not just teach to the test. I often hear frustration by teachers saying that I feel like we're teaching to the test. And this year, I feel like a lot of the teachers were like, these kids are already kind of stressed out as it is, and throwing the standardized testing on top of it, it was really, really challenging. A lot of them had concerns about their mental health, well-being of their students during test time. So I think that always should be a concern. And I'm probably going to have you ask the second part of that question when you talked about the academic success with regards to iReady, because I believe that was a second question.
Well, I think that the part of that question had to do with, are you concerned about teachers just being proctors? You know, like somebody who, just instead of being able to be trusted as a teacher with your ability, with your degrees, many of us have master's degrees in education. Yes. So do you feel teachers are slowly becoming classroom proctors, where we're just basically delivering this rote here?
Right. And I don't know. I guess I have so much more faith in teachers. I know that they have to straddle, like, part of their evaluation is how the students do in general on the test, and schools get graded against that. So they do have to teach to what's in the test. But I also think that teachers love the subjects that they are teaching. And so they always seek to find very meaningful, in-depth curriculum that the students can interact with, because this is what they do, this is what they love, and they find really creative ways to get the students to interact with the material, to find themselves in the material, and to have it be meaningful. So for the most part, what I'm seeing is they're doing a good job of both providing information that they need to have, knowledge that they need to have for the test to do well on the test, and also providing quality material in the classroom that isn't just about what's on the test, and making the material meaningful. And because if you don't make it meaningful, it's going to be more difficult for the kids to learn. So we have to be able to have the students connect to the material. I do know what the iReady is, because I was a substitute teacher up at Vistancia. They use iReady all the time. And a lot of those online assessments are good to see because you do have kids at all different levels. So sometimes they use those more to see where they each are in regards to their reading levels. It helps for kids to be individually constantly working maybe on their comprehension skills at all different levels. So it does do a nice job of seeing where the kids are growing and where they can improve. So I think it's helpful to have those as well, because it does offer some individualized learning skills to be learned. So.
Right on. I'm going to go ahead and end this, and then I'm going to allow you to have your closing remarks, because this is I think a positive shout out to Peoria Unified. It says, the PUSD has an extraordinary student support services team that is implementing best practice violence prevention programs across high need schools. PUSD was the only district in Arizona to receive a 2019 multi-year competitive school safety grant from the U.S. Department of Education, something to celebrate. So
yes,
I
definitely.
appreciate people who are showing up. We had a great number of people who came today. Yeah. So I'm really happy about the engagement that's happening in Peoria Unified. It is one of those districts that has sometimes received a little bit of national attention.
Mm-hmm.
So Melissa, I want you to just go ahead and tell the folks why you are the best candidate for them to support in Peoria Unified.
Thank you. So one of the reasons is that I am, all of my reasoning for running for the board, for all of the reasoning for my campaign, getting out and speaking to people in the community, is that I want what is in the best interests of the students. And my focus is going to make sure that our board stays very focused on what is in the best needs of the students, by making sure that when they step into that classroom, that they are ready to learn. If that means they're facing obstacles at home, that's creating problems to be able to learn in the classroom, having services that can support that family who's maybe going through some transitions or some tragedy is important. And also making sure that the students have everything they need as far as the resources in the classroom. And that means having highly trained teachers and support staff and aides and special education, making sure that we have all of the services in place to be able to meet the needs of their IEPs and their 504 plans, and also making sure that we have some positive relationships, not only between the student and the teacher, but the teachers and the parents and within the community. I think our teachers have done a wonderful job of fostering that great relationship with the students. I think that PUSD could do a little bit better at fostering a better relationship with parents and bringing them back into the schools through robust volunteer programs, and maybe having more localized town halls to really feel like everybody's part of this, the collaborative approach to making sure that our kids are successful academically and that they are, you know, emotionally in a good place as well. And so I think that's what I offer. And I also am willing to listen to all different viewpoints and opinions and take that into consideration, because I think it's important for a school board to be representative of their entire district and not just a small group, and to understand the needs of all students. So thank you.
Well, and the fact that you showed up today in a field of, I think, what did I say, 5 or something like that?
I think it's actually 4, because I think one of those she may have filed, but I don't think she went forward with anything.
Okay. But the fact that you're here, we're grateful for it. You know,
Thank
you're
you.
willing to uphold the Constitution, and you are clearly a dedicated educator, counselor, somebody who has their finger to the pulse. Of course, we're a nonpartisan organization, and this is a nonpartisan race, and we're not going to make any endorsements or anything like that. But the fact that you showed up today on a Tuesday when you're in the middle of running for school board it speaks volumes, I think, to your character. So thank you so much, Melissa, for coming today. I'm going to go ahead and once again remind everybody that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that needs your support. So if this is the kind of conversation that you want to hear on a regular basis, well, you're in luck, because we have another board forum coming up with the Scottsdale Unified School Board District. We so far have 4 people who have registered. So I'm very excited about that, because that's a very crowded field. I think there's 7 people running for 2 seats. So that's going to be Wednesday, June 8th at 6 p.m. I believe, like I said, I think we got 4 candidates who have agreed to show up. We also have coming up on Tuesday, May 31st. Oh, good. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I swear, Lindsay is our development director, and she is the glue that keeps us from going unhinged. But we have our May 31st secular speaker series, fantastic author and just amazing person. Chrissy Stroop is going to be there. She is going to be presenting a speech about division, disinformation, demonization, and how Christian nationalists are creating an authoritarian America. So you can see the details there. We also have coming up, aside from the June 8th Scottsdale Unified School District Forum, we have Heather Weaver, who is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU program on freedoms of religion and belief on the implications of SCOTUS case Kennedy versus Bremerton. And for those of you who may not know, that is a case where the high school football coach decided that it was okay to pray and force his students to pray. So please make sure that you show up, and Lindsay again has provided the link for all of you. So thanks everybody for coming out tonight. And that's the end of our presentation. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.